I trust John. John is back there. I trust him. Hi, everybody. My name is Kathleen McAvoy. I am a senior policy advisor at the Every Library Institute, and I'm delighted to be here today. And my goal is to get up here quickly and get out of the way because we have great speakers who have wonderful things to talk to you about. And so I'm very enthused about being here. I started out thinking, like, what are the things that keep you thinking, keep you working? And when it comes to academic institutions and libraries and scholarly publishing and content and technology, I talk a lot about your sphere of concern, which is massive, and your sphere of influence, which is small. So I also try to understand this sort of fire hose of information, executive orders, regulations, lawsuits, and it helps me to understand that they are part of a tactic, right? We want people to feel helpless and alone and afraid and ineffective. But as the person who is a therapist, you'll find him on this bit.ly link if you go there. That's my sort of brain where I keep everything that I've written, things that people that I follow, articles that have importance to me. And one of the gentlemen who talked about sphere of influence and sphere of control, he says, the world doesn't need your guilt and exhaustion. It needs your energy, your presence, and your ability to actually do something. And we need to shrink our circle of concern closer to our sphere of influence and focus on the things that can make a difference. So that's how you show up in your relationships, where you spend your money, the organizations you support, how you set your boundaries with the media, and doom scrolling, which you should stop. And the conversations that you have in your community and the local actions you participate in. Mallory McMurrow, who's running for Senate in Michigan, said this is a lifetime commitment. So think of what kind of relationship you want to have with your community, your state, and with your country. And so today we're going to try and take this down to a little bit more reasonable level. And I hope that this is as valuable to you as it has been to me just in preparing for this conversation. So thank you.
All right, everybody, I'm going to come on up here. The best benefit of this is that I am tall enough to need to tip up the mic, but short enough that the screen will cover my face. So, how lucky for you. I had the honor and privilege of presenting a pre-conference at this year's event, and so some of you who were there will hopefully be able to revisit some of this with the rest of the group. But what I wanted to start out with is point out that we are not alone, and that this is, even though it feels new, it's not exactly new. Some facets of it are new because, you know, we progress as a society. But I pulled 3 quotes that talk about kind of the general malaise of academia and the library in that space. One from 2019, one from 2008, and one from 1989. And so I'm just going to read the 1989 one for you. Librarians should seize the initiative to take advantage of opportunities the new technologies are presenting them to make the restructured library a major force in the university's new information environment. Finally, and most important, academic librarians should be attempting now to define the roles that they want libraries and librarians to play, because if they do not, others will define those roles for them. So as I read this quote from 1989, I think that if I had pulled a joke on you and put 2025 on there, you might actually think that it was stated in 2025, because this is an issue that we still are facing. And when I revisit this, sometimes it can feel like, how hopeless. But I don't see it as hopeless. I see it as a reminder that when we are progressing, when we are innovating, when we are moving, when we are advocating, it's a slow, incremental change over time. And it gives me permission to get rid of my expectations that I will Starfleet my way to excellence in a year or two. That is not going to happen. It is not a reality, and it is okay to give myself permission to engage in incremental change. And I also take this as an opportunity to remember that incremental change is more long-lasting change. So those are things that I just wanted to pop out there as we're talking today. I also brought this up in my pre-conference, and this time I want to show y'all what this looked like at the School of Library and Information at the University of Iowa, where I am director. And in that role, because we are housed in the graduate college, I almost operate in this strange little way as like a little mini dean, because my dean also happens to be the associate provost of graduate education. And so it gives us the opportunity to have a closer, more front-facing conversation with the central administration of the University of Iowa. And I've learned a lot in that. I've learned that it's important for me to expand the perception of the library's identity from service and support programs only to sources of strategic insight at the institutional level. And I support the main library in this effort as director of SLIS, and I encourage my students who will go on to hopefully fruitful and energetic careers in academic librarianship to really see themselves in that role. Beyond service and support, one that plays a crucial role in strategic insight at the institutional level. And so in our curriculum, when we're planning for this, we want to prepare students who are able to do this. And this is because of something that I will say until the day I die. It is absolutely the truth. Please, please believe me when I tell you that somebody not being able to find something is somebody assuming that it does not exist. And if you want proof of this, please come to my house and I will show you how many nail clippers my husband has purchased. Because when he can't find one, his assumption is it does not exist. This is a very common aspect of human behavior. When people do not know or are not familiar with or do not have a full understanding of, they will assume that it is not there. They will not assume that they don't know. So that is something that I remind myself constantly. If I am working to shift the perception that the institution holds of the library program, of what library students are graduating to be able to accomplish, then I need to make sure that they have a very detailed and thorough understanding of what we bring to the table. And then I also want to dispel any misconceptions they may have regarding the library's role in institutional health. They are going to believe things like, well, if we're super techie trendy, then we don't need that space over there. We're cool. They're going to assume all kinds of things, like recently an issue that I'm dealing with where there is some proactive censoring of databases that faculty need a hold of. They're going to make these decisions and based on misconceptions about the role of the academic library in the overall health of the institution, how the health of that space impacts the health of the institution at large, and then consequently the health of the alumni, and then after that, the job market and the status of employment and achievement and entrepreneurship and innovation in your state. So yes, we play a role in all of these things, and we have to dispel any misconceptions related to those things. And then demonstrating how we are able to directly contribute to the institution's ability to meet its priorities. And in doing so, our efforts, as much as possible, are to make sure that we're part of those conversations before they start happening. I don't want to be the person that comes to the strategic plan after it's already been planned out and I'm just trying to shoehorn my way in. My goal is to eventually become a crucial part of the development of that plan. So they know, they feel that I have to be there at the table to throw down. So anyway, as you're developing this awareness, you want to look at how your visibility can be expanded. And the things that we've worked on is determining how to tell our story across campus in ways that combine data and stories. I'm a big believer in putting all those two together because any excuse that somebody will make to diminish the impact of one set of data can be countered with the other set. So if somebody says, well, of course you got these stories. You picked the 3 people that have good stories. Well, then I got some numbers to show you. And then if someone says, well, your numbers were, incorrectly or not telling the full scope of the situation, then I have stories that can expand the scope of the situation for you. So mixing those two things together are a much more powerful way to present the point that you're trying to make. And then how is it that the library contributes to the student experience going beyond what we typically consider? So all those things, how do you impact first gen? How do you impact recruitment and retention? What is the role that you play when parents come with their students to tour the campus? Are you visible? Are you present? Are you proactive? Are you engaged? Do parents and students have a clear understanding of the role of the academic library in preparing their students to be competitive on the job market? That is the biggest concern that people have right now, because college is just getting way more expensive and the pot of money is getting smaller. And so what do you do to demonstrate the role that we play in preparing these students to be employed, gainfully employed? And I bolding and underlining and italicizing gainfully. So anyway, this is what we did when I was hired at the University of Iowa. We decided to do this through strategic planning. We wanted to be able to advocate for ways that we prepared future librarians that are equipped to do this exact thing. We wanted to tie our accomplishments to what we were seeing with our alum, and we wanted to address major issues that were central to the University of Iowa, but also central to the state of Iowa, which the state of Iowa worries about several things that are probably familiar to many of you. The number one thing being brain drain. It's a huge issue in the state. In fact, it's impacted the way that they are now setting the admissions percentage for our medical school. They've upped it to 90%, so now they say 90% of the students admitted must come from Iowa, because they're hoping if they come from there, they'll stay. So this is a major issue. And then the other issue is the agricultural, the rural health of the state, and pollution. And those last two are intimately tied together, because then that you get into the aspect of agricultural pollution, but also the cancer rate in the state of Iowa, which is very, very high. So as we're doing this, we're looking at the strategic plan for the institution, and we formally went through our objectives as a school, and we tied them to the institution's strategic plan. So in Iowa, the first strand for the university is excellence in teaching and learning. The goal is to foster high-quality teaching and dynamic educational experiences that empower all students to achieve their aspirations. And so we kept that for us too. That is also our plan. And here is how we're going to meet those plans. This is how we're going to support and forward the institution's progress in this area. We do the same thing with innovative research and creative discovery. And the other thing too is, in doing this, we're able to tie our accomplishments and our metrics and our requests not only to what we need to be better as a school, but in ways that translate into meeting the metrics for the institution. It's a much more powerful argument. So right now, as I'm talking with University Council regarding that little censorship issue with the database, I'm able to tie it to our objectives under excellence in teaching and learning. I'm able to tie it to our objectives in innovative research and creative discovery. I'm able to directly tie it to how this issue is not only negatively impacting SLIS, but as a result, negatively impacting the University of Iowa. It makes for a much more powerful argument. So here's the rest of that example: our welcoming environment, the transformative societal impact, which again directly ties to state needs that we have. So always highlighting not only how we meet these institutional requirements, but we also then further address concerns at the state level. Anytime that I'm presenting a request for anything, anytime that I'm innovating, anytime that I'm planning forward, anytime that I am pushing back against something coming down the road, I am pausing it and highlighting how it not only benefits SLIS, but it benefits the University of Iowa. And I have just made that absolutely the funnest exercise ever, because sometimes it's a little bit of a stretch, but I do put it out there as clearly as I can so that they can see that we are central to a healthy institution. So again, the last thing that they have is the holistic well-being and success. Provide a comprehensive foundation of support for individuals throughout all stages of their relationship with the university. You want to attract and retain talented students, faculty, and staff who contribute to a thriving university community. So how does SLIS do that? And here are the objectives Again, that we formally list, that we have formally committed to, that we track our achievement of, and then that we present. So when I'm asking for resources, when I'm asking for faculty, when I'm asking for funding, when I'm asking for materials and training, I am tying it directly to achieving metrics that support the institutional goals. I'm saying, we have formally submitted this plan to you, you have approved this plan, you've acknowledged that it ties closely to your plan, that it furthers the achievement of your plan, and so I'm asking that you support these things. And then when the no comes through, because sometimes a no happens, I can sleep peacefully at night saying, well, we will continue to do the work that we're funded and supported to do, and I am going to let you learn the lesson of dropping the ball on that end, because we do not go in and pave holes created by a lack of attention or resources. We have learned painfully that sometimes it's best to just let people be sad. So in year one, we are in year one of this process after formally going through an extensive amount of revitalization and restructuring. We are establishing our implementation teams. We have one for each strategic priority. We've developed, again, detailed action plans with specific metrics because we revisit this at every faculty meeting. We discuss it. We are locking and tracking what we're doing. And we're also in the process of that tracking, figuring out how efficient and how possible and how powerful and impactful it actually is. Sometimes an idea sounds awesome. It really does. It's such a beautiful, gorgeous idea. And then in your day-to-day, it's just a monogamy of disappointment, just disappointment, sadness and just despair. It doesn't work, a bad idea. But you need to track it so you know why that happened. And then conducting, again, this basic baseline assessment of where we are now and where we want to go in the future. And immediately launching initial high-priority initiatives, which we are in the process of doing right now. So again, for us, it's really been a way to achieve a vast amount of change and increase support and funding in a very short amount of time. It's also put us where we're able to do this in a state where some of the legislation would lead you to believe that the opposite is happening. So it's been nice to flourish in an otherwise difficult environment. I'll put it that way. So thank you. I will hand it on over to the next one.
I am in fact not tall enough to not be seen by the computer screen, so I will do this and hold my notes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about leading behind the scenes. I think there's been a lot of conversation about strategic planning and kind of how you map what you're doing in your library to the institutional priorities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what you do, work that you can do that's not visible. And so this really speaks to the kind of sphere of concern that you might have versus the sphere of influence that you actually have. So I'm Lyda Fontes McCartan. I'm the director of the School of Information Science at the University of South Carolina. And I joined the School of Information Science 2 years ago. So if anybody who's from South Carolina remembers 2 years ago, we had, not unlike many parts of the country, we had anti-ALA sentiment ramping up. The state started fighting with the School Library Association. We had a bill on the floor to remove the MLIS as a requirement for jobs. There was just a lot of stuff happening at the time. Great time to take over a library program. So what I really had to think about was what is my role here? And so faculty and alumni were not always happy when I was quiet in the face of what was happening in the country and in the state. And I have to remind them that they don't see some of that work that's happening behind the scenes to ensure the school survives, the MLIS requirement for school librarians in the state is maintained, that the MLIS is seen as valuable in the state, and that we protect accreditation of the program. And so that's my sphere of influence. And I have huge spheres of concern for the profession and the country, but I can't control some of that. And so where can I then impact the most? So in the work that I do, I am not really visible, right? I do not do press unless I'm promoting a program. I do not do interviews about book bans. I do not do interviews to talk about conflicts in the state. That is not my role to be able to achieve all those things I mentioned. The faculty do those things, alumni do those things, and I love them for it. The faculty research, the faculty do programming, I support that work, but I'm not an advocate in the way I might be as a practitioner. So the first thing that I did when I arrived and kind of got the lay of the land of what was going on, I met with my university lobbyists. Every university has lobbyists. They don't call themselves that. They call themselves something else, but that's what they are. And so I met with, we have 2 lobbyists on campus. I call them the dynamic duo. And they, this anti-accreditation, kind of negative ALA stuff and the anti-MLIS bill were kind of coming through. And I said, well, I need to talk to the people influencing politics in the state for us. And so I sent an email and I said, these are the bills that I'm concerned about. I would like to have a conversation. I got an email response very quickly, because if something's negatively impacting the university, they're very concerned about that. And so we met in my office, and this was a very crucial meeting. The reason I'm encouraging this and kind of talking about it is I don't think the lobbyists always know exactly what's happening in the library or the importance of the library, where the library sits. They might know something's politically happening, but they don't necessarily know how that's impacting the campus. And that's definitely true for the library program at South Carolina. So there was a lack of understanding about the MLIS program specifically, where it sits. They thought it sat inside the library, which it doesn't. It sits outside of the library. They didn't know, not that they should have, that it's the only library school in the state of South Carolina. So when they said, well, what are your peers doing? I said, I have no peers. I am the only one. Now, this excites them if we're the only one, right? Because they need to fight for that, so that's exciting. But they advocate for USC, and so they had a lot of questions. And so when we're kind of the title of the session, we're talking about reclaiming the narrative. There was an internal narrative that was missing from the concerns of the institution that I had to bring to light. I suspect there's many things happening in the library itself that are hidden also from these things, from particular people. So I spent time educating them, provided them context, a better understanding of why certain legislation was harmful to the program and the university. It's like an anti-MLIS, removing the MLIS requirement from management positions might not seem like it's impactful, but it's hugely impactful, right, to the MLIS program. Not being able to pay money to ALA is hugely impactful to an ALA accredited program. So these were things that they needed to know. So in the context of also the library work is they also fight with the state about budgets. And so lobbyists are very important. If you don't know who they are on your campus, I highly recommend having a meeting with them. I also met with our communications director, and I don't mean the person that sends out the weekly what's happening on campus communications person. I mean the big C communications person that handles the messaging of the institution. And so I met with him just to let him know, here is the lay of the land about what's happening. Here is what my faculty will be talking about. Here is visible alumni and what they are engaging in. And I just want to make you aware of this. And so I keep him in the loop on things. I'm never told not to say something. He helps me craft a message. We do have conversations about interviews people take just so we know what's coming. When the ALA president, for example, came to the South Carolina Library Association, we had a conversation about if we were going to say anything, what we were, how we were going to engage with the Library Association, that kind of thing. And so my job is to make sure that they are aware of those things, anything that could bring attention. So again, they don't stop communications, they don't stop things, it's just a matter of them knowing, so that when we get new legislation or when the MLIS program is mentioned by name on the floor of the House, we can communicate and we know each other now. And so he's probably, I don't talk to him a lot, but he is one of my key stakeholders in my job. So I think the important thing here is that there's power and advocacy behind the scenes. Not everyone realizes that, and so for me, it's where my most important work is happening. So my best advice is to just find and meet these people. They will be advocates for you. It's just a matter of couching your program or your library in the context of, as Lucy said, the priorities of the institution, but for me, also the priorities of the state. So we've shared these slides as a link in the comments in the app, and in that is also a sample one-pager, which the lobbyist asked me for, and my first one-pager was 4 pages. And he was like, no, literally a page. This is actually not even, I couldn't even do it. It's a page and a half or 2 pages. And then they pick and choose the pieces they want to use. But I share that with you because it shows how I've it shows how I've placed the MLIS program in the context of the priorities of the state. So we've talked a lot about the priorities of the institution, but there's also priorities of the state, which for me are important because the lobbyists are talking to politicians and that's what they care about. They're not necessarily that concerned with the institution. And so in South Carolina, I positioned us as, we're important to the fact that South Carolina is a tech hub. We're looking at economic development. And we have the second highest rate of migration of educated professionals coming into South Carolina. And so then there's an expectation of educated professionals about what they're getting when they're walking into an institution of higher learning, or they're walking into a public library, or they're putting their kids in school. And so the protection of things like an MLIS credential for school librarians becomes very important. And so if you read through that, you kind of see how I couched that. And if you can throw in the state motto, which I did, it becomes more impressive. And so that's just an example. So the lobbyists asked for that and then asked for it only in a Word document. It's because they pick pieces that are most important to them. What's interesting is 2 years ago, they didn't have this document. They had no idea. And so, who knows what would have happened to some things at the institution if we had never had this meeting. So while it's important to do research at the institutional level, what's important to the institution, I also encourage you to think about how you think about the state, how your library fits into the state, and then the behind-the-scene work that you can really do. So if you've not kind of engaged in that work, find those people and start having those meetings. Thank you.
And quickly, as Alex is making his way to the microphone, I will say, as somebody who has been in the room and with lobbyists, talking to state legislators, it's not an adversarial conversation. It's you pointing out the unintended consequences of something that they thought was a great idea. It's really just you saying, do you realize that this would cause that? It's being this voice of reason, and my husband and I would call the Jack Germond of the McLaughlin group from years ago. It's the voice of reason. It's the person in the room who's not adding to the conflict, who's adding to the information. And a one-pager is a way to do that from behind the scenes. And I've seen it work, where lobbyists have taken something that I said, an anecdote that I told them, and there are no databases in the terrible Florida law about education, the Don't Say Gay law, because my lobbyist remembered an anecdote that I had told him about another hearing in Nebraska, and he mentioned it to the person who had written the bill and said, I'm not opening up this bill is too big, I'm not opening it up. And when he told her the anecdote, she said, oh, that won't work. And he opened up the bill and he changed it. So it's not about adversarial, it doesn't have to be a struggle, it's about you adding to the information.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I work at this place that is under a microscope. It's called Harvard. It is a privilege to work there, but I have never been an Ivy League student and come from the state of Florida. So my politics are interesting. But what I want to say is first thanks to my three colleagues here for inviting me to join them on this panel. Some of you, I look around, I see you. Some of the alumni of the Leadership Institute for Academic Librarians, thank you for being here, and thank you for attending. I'm not here to sell the Institute to anyone who hasn't been, but I did say that. But I do think that there's a really important connection between the work that is being done in LIST curriculum and the work that needs to be done in our continuing professional development. And it's a very purposeful attempt on my part to be in the room with our LIST faculty and directors. And again, I'm very grateful. So I really stepped in it the other week. Some of you, how many of you practice in the Northeast? Okay. Do you know your accreditation body? NECHI. People say it all different ways, but I'm just going with NECHI today. So some of you might know this. if you're living somewhere else, either in the country or the world. But this, the New England Commission of Higher Education is drafting their latest standards that are to be published next year in 2026. And those standards have removed any mention of libraries, librarians, archivists, cultural heritage workers, books, and the scant mention of IT is also offensive. So with that said, they provided an opportunity for librarians to respond, and not just librarians, but anyone to respond. And then they saw that we were legion as a profession, librarians and archivists. And huge thanks to Kathleen and the Every Library Institute for supporting the framing of that work so that a lot of people had the ability to craft their messaging structure. So what Lyda has also just presented too, and Lucy showing the strategic planning work, these are all models that are adaptable, and I hope that we can use as our premiums to take away from this conference. Anyhow, long story short, where we just met they gave us 30 minutes to meet with them, and this happened on Zoom last week. There were too many people. The Zoom room that they have only admits 300 people. So I got kicked out at a certain point and was able to claw my way back in. I don't know how, but I was really happy that we had that much representation, and encourage you all when you see examples like this one to use your voices. It doesn't matter what your personal politics are, but to use your voices to advocate for multi-literacies, ranging from what we know as information literacy, AI literacy, and other literacies that are just part and parcel to the work that we're doing in libraries and in education. So with that short story, I just wanted to share a couple of things that I think can be helpful for framing your thinking as you might consider communicating with your local government, within your institution or a consortium, in order to advocate for policy and change. Harvard is naturally a public policy education magnet, and the research that most of the faculty are doing across the different social sciences are policy driven. So I come from teacher education, and I was shocked that I had to really do a deeper dive in education policy, even though I had lived in DC for almost 20 years. So there was a lot that I was able to learn, and some of that is shared here. In our shared drive that is up on the app, since I promised premiums, these will be added, but they're adaptable models that you can walk away with, you can do some more research on. I don't have time to go through all of them, I'm sorry, and also I would probably make you fall asleep or more hungry or thirsty. But for those of you who attended the Library Leadership Institute 2 years ago, you were introduced to the Ishikawa fishbone diagram and logic models. So I also see these as metacognitive tools for me to help sort of sort out my thinking. When I crafted my letter to Nechi, it's like, yeah, you can make a very standard outline, but what was I trying to get at? And so for logic models, in the example that's here, it allows you to think about what you want to see happen in the future. So, by time. And again, that's not the most perfect metacognitive tool for every instance, but for me, just to do that self-reflection work was really important so that I could make my policy response a bit tighter. And then decision trees, if you're working and the example up here says stocks, bonds, and startup, but the document I'm sharing with you is budget related to purchasing new materials, licensing new materials, and also then adopting OER, So how much does OER cost? 0. Right? So a decision tree would actually just show you that, like, oh, okay, well, this is not going to cost us anything. And sometimes it takes a visualization like this to share with administrators or up the chain. And also, I hate to be chain specific here, but thinking about why we make decisions as leaders and getting our colleagues who might report to us to participate in that decision-making work. And so using a visualization or being able to show how something like a decision tree or a fishbone diagram is relative to the outcomes that we're hoping for, those are definitely great tools to show your work, show the math. The other tool that we use in the Leadership Institute, and for those of you who never want to attend, this is a free takeaway. We do a lot of case study work, and so each individual writes their own case study of the problems that they're facing in their institution. So one of the things that we'll probably be doing going forward is saying, hey, sorry, you might be in a blue state at this moment, but we have problems too, just like everyone else. I do write those book censorship responses, and so it's happening in Massachusetts, which is often called the bluest state in this country. So I'll let you intuit from there. What I'm really saying is that we have to help each other. Just getting down to why we're here right now to talk about communication is really, again, getting back to this idea to amplify the invisible work that librarians, archivists, cultural heritage knowledge managers are often doing, but our leaders don't see. So those visualizations, those tools to show the math, to show the work that we need to do ahead of time so that we have influence, these are ways that I believe we can help amplify our voices and each other's voices. I'm not going to get into too much about grit. It's a contested term. Angela Duckworth is the person that is attributed to. She also does rely on explaining resilience, and I think that the resilience factor is something that, as a profession, we can talk a little bit more about, not today, but in the future. And then our core values, again, getting back to what Lucy was saying about strategic planning, but every institution has its own values, and so I'm not going to go too much further with professional development and upskilling, but I'm citing the work of Leo Lowe and also the other work in artificial intelligence now that we're dealing with. The last thing I just want to mention too is I have been in institutions where position descriptions don't have percentages of time allotted to responsibilities. And so I think this is another way that if you are in an institution like that you can advocate or put it somewhere off to the side so that not only the library worker knows how much time in their job needs to be spent toward their actual responsibilities, but also to public engagement. And to think about that as leaders, managers, and also collaborators and coworkers, ways that we can prioritize this work together. So with that said, questions?
Yeah. And I wanted to just point out another advantage, Alex, of the slide that you showed with the models that document how you get to a point of thought. Two benefits to that. One, it demonstrates that you went through a deliberate group effort to get to the conclusion. It's not a personal opinion or an idea out of your gut or your charisma. It's a well thought out process you went through. And it also documents that process to avoid reinvention, recycling, right? You have it there. We've done this. It's now visible. It's documented. And if you happen to leave or someone on your team takes a job someplace else, the ideas don't go with them. That documentation remains. So it's so important. I just wanted to highlight
Institutional
that.
memory, absolutely.
And I will say, if anybody does have questions, we have microphones set up, but that notion of it's not your personal decision is also, there was an ALA study that looked at perceptions of librarians and people, and this was in the public library space, and people were the respondents who were positive about librarians were then further told, you know, these collection development decisions aren't their personal choices. They have a specific training in collection development. And when they were told that and asked again about their perception of librarians, their impressions increased even further. So that is that personal, it seems personal, but there's so much about you and what you do that is your professional expertise. And Lucy talks a lot about making the implicit explicit. That's one of those areas. It's certainly ripe for that. But if there aren't any questions, we really appreciate you letting us talk here for right up until the the deadline.
Just enough time for you to run to your reservation for dinner.
Thank you so much. Have a great time tonight, wherever you're headed.